I should have known something was off about this neighborhood when I got my first HOA letter for having my trash cans visible for more than 13 minutes after pickup, but like an idiot, I brushed it off. Crescent Oaks is a prestigious community. The letter had said, printed on thick, overpriced paper with an unnecessary gold foil logo of an actual oak tree, because of course it had to be fancy. Residents are expected to uphold the integrity and visual harmony of our neighborhood. Translation, they will micromanage the living hell out of you. I bought the house 6 months ago, lured in by the quiet streets, the big yards, and the idea that maybe, just maybe, I could live somewhere that didn't involve hearing my upstairs neighbors reenact a stampede every night. As a property lawyer, I should have been more suspicious of the HOA contract, but I skimmed it, confident I could handle anything they threw at me. Then I met her, Debbie Whitmore, a woman who looked like she had never not been on a neighborhood committee in her entire life. Shoulder-length highlighted bob, permanent scowl, the kind of posture that suggested she was perpetually prepared to file a complaint about something. She was the self-appointed queen of Crescent Oaks, and if the power had gone to her head, it had long since bypassed her brain. Our first interaction was over mulch. I had just finished spreading a fresh layer in my front flower beds when she strutted over, arms crossed, wearing that HOA-issued navy blue polo like it was a police uniform. "You can't have red mulch," she informed me, with the tone of someone breaking bad news about a terminal illness. "Excuse me?" I blinked at her, confused. She sighed dramatically, like I was some exhausting child. "It's in the guidelines. Natural. Wood tones only. Your mulch is too red." I stared at the perfectly fine mulch. "It's literally called cedar. Cedar is a wood, a natural wood." "It's unnaturally red." She leaned in, lowering her voice. "I'd hate for you to get a violation." "Notice," I forced a smile, "and I'd hate to waste my time replacing perfectly good mulch. Have a nice day, Debbie." That was the beginning of what I now refer to as the war of unnecessary petty nonsense. Over the next few months, Debbie went out of her way to enforce the most ridiculous rules with an enthusiasm that suggested she got actual joy out of it. My trash can placement? An issue. My mailbox was apparently 1 inch too tall. My grass was half an inch too long, but the final straw, the thing that pushed her over the edge into full-blown unhinged tyranny, was my solar driveway lights. Had installed them one weekend, small, modern-looking lights that lined my driveway. Not only did they look good, but they were practical, and given that this neighborhood allegedly cared about aesthetics, I figured they'd be fine. I was so wrong. 3 days after putting them in, I got a notice. Unauthorized lawn ornamentation. I ignored it. The next week, I got another. Violation number 2. Failure to comply will result in fines. I sent an email to the HOA, explaining that these were not, in fact, lawn ornaments, but functional safety lights, and unless they wanted a lawsuit over selectively enforced rules, they should kindly back off. That was when Debbie escalated. I woke up one morning to find a bright orange notice taped, not placed, not tucked, but aggressively taped, to my front door. In bold, angry font, it read, "Final notice. Remove unapproved light fixtures immediately or face legal consequences." I laughed. Out loud. This woman was actually threatening legal action over solar driveway lights. At this point, it wasn't even about the lights anymore. It was about principle. I refused to let a middle-aged control freak with a superiority complex dictate what I could or couldn't do with my own damn property. So, naturally, I left the lights exactly where they were. Big mistake. Because 2 nights later, Debbie lost what little remained of her mind. It was around midnight when I heard the first crack. I shot up in bed, ears straining. Another crack, then a sharp clunk, something hitting the pavement. I grabbed my phone, heart pounding, and slipped out of bed. Peeking through my blinds, I could barely believe what I was seeing. Debbie Whitmore, in full-blown psycho mode, standing on my driveway, wielding a golf club like she was competing in the HOA Open. She swung at one of the lights again. Smash, shattering the plastic casing. She muttered something under her breath, her face twisted in the glow of the few surviving lights. For a second, I just stood there, dumbfounded. She's actually insane. Then I did what any sane person would do. I grabbed my phone and hit record, stepped onto the porch, voice steady but loud enough to cut through the night. "Hey, Debbie!" She froze mid-swing. Slowly she turned, the golf club still raised like some deranged HOA warrior. "What the hell are you doing?" I asked, holding up my phone, the camera lens aimed right at her. Her eyes darted to the phone, then back to me. "These lights violate HOA—" "Debbie," I cut her off. "You are trespassing. And—" I panned the camera to the carnage on my driveway, shattered plastic and bent stakes littering the pavement. "This is destruction of private property." Her face twitched. "You don't understand." "No, you don't understand." I let out a slow breath, barely suppressing a laugh. "Did you know that destruction of property over a certain value is a felony?" The color drained from her face. "You know what I do for a living, right?" I continued, stepping closer, relishing every second of her dawning realization. She swallowed. "I'm a property lawyer." And just like that, the power shifted. For the first time since I'd moved in, Debbie had nothing to say. And I wasn't done. Yet, she stood there, golf club still in hand, mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Her entire body radiated the panicked energy of someone who just realized they had monumentally screwed up. "See, Debbie," I continued, keeping my phone trained on her. "Trespassing? That's bad. Destroying someone else's property? Even worse. But when that damage exceeds a certain dollar amount..." I let that last part hang in the air, watching her eyes dart to the wreckage she had created. Her breath hitched. She knew exactly what I was implying. "That's a felony, Debbie." I let out a small chuckle. "And lucky for you, I happen to know a thing or two about real estate law. I was just enforcing HOA regulations," she stammered, her voice suddenly a lot less authoritative than it had been when she was policing my trash cans. I arched an eyebrow. "With a golf club?" She quickly dropped it, as if just realizing she was still holding the evidence. It clattered against the pavement, the sound unnervingly satisfying. "This was a mistake," she said hastily. "Let's be reasonable. You take those lights out, and we'll pretend this never happened." "Oh, I love that idea," I said, stepping forward. "Except, let me offer an even better one. How about you pay for the damage, formally resign from the HOA board, and then I pretend this never happened?" Her face twisted. "I'm not resigning over this." I smiled. "I think you will." She scoffed, attempting to recover whatever authority she had left. "You wouldn't actually press charges, wouldn't I?" I tilted my head. "Because, Debbie, I have this all on camera, and just to make it more interesting, I think I'll go ahead and CC the entire HOA when I send this footage to the police." Her lip curled. "You wouldn't dare." "Oh, I would," I assured her. "I absolutely would. And just imagine what will happen when the residents of Crescent Oaks see their beloved HOA president throwing a violent tantrum on someone's driveway. That's going to be great for your credibility." She stood rigid, hands clenched at her sides. I could see the wheels turning in her head, scrambling for some way out of this. I pressed on. "You've spent months harassing me over nonsense, hiding behind rules that barely make sense. But now, you broke the law, Debbie, on camera." I turned my phone screen toward her for emphasis. "The HOA isn't going to protect you from this." Her eyes flickered with something desperate. "There must be something you want in exchange for dropping this." Bingo. I feigned deep thought. "Well, now that you mention it, first, you're going to pay for every single one of my lights, in cash, up front." Her jaw tightened. "Fine. And," I continued, "you're stepping down from the HOA, effective immediately." She looked like she'd rather eat glass. "And if I don't?" "Then I press charges," I said simply. "And considering Crescent Oaks loves its property values, I doubt they'll be thrilled about their fearless leader getting arrested for felony vandalism. It might even make the local news. How prestigious." Her fingers twitched. I could tell. She was mentally fighting a war between pride and self-preservation, but she had no winning move. Not this time. She exhaled sharply. "Fine, I'll step down." "Great. And one last thing," I added. Her eyes narrowed. "You're writing me a formal apology. A what? I grinned. A written apology. I want it notarized, Debbie. Her nostrils flared. You're enjoying this. Oh, absolutely, I admitted. You made my life hell over nothing. You don't just get to slink away after committing an actual crime. So, yes, I want my apology, and I want it notarized. Her shoulders sagged, but she nodded stiffly. Fine. See? I said, tucking my phone into my pocket. That wasn't so hard. She turned without another word, marching stiffly back toward her house. I watched, half expecting her to spontaneously combust from sheer rage. By noon, the next day, a check was slipped under my door. Far more than what the lights had cost, which told me she was hoping I'd take the extra as a silent bribe to never speak of this again. By evening, a formal HOA-wide email announced her resignation for personal reasons, and, by the following morning, a notarized letter arrived in my mailbox. It was the most insincere apology I had ever read, so stiffly written it practically radiated resentment. Dear Mr. Wilson, I acknowledge my recent behavior was inappropriate and unacceptable. My actions regarding your solar driveway lights were misguided, and I regret any inconvenience or distress I have caused you. I take full responsibility for my choices and will ensure no further conflict arises between us. Please accept my apology. Sincerely, Deborah Whitmore. It was beautiful. But the best part? The HOA bylaws were very clear about board resignations. Once you stepped down, you couldn't rejoin for 5 years. Debbie had effectively exiled herself from power. Crescent Oaks had never felt more peaceful. The neighborhood adjusted surprisingly well to her absence. Without her micromanaging every detail of people's lives, it was like the entire community collectively unclenched. People started repainting their mailboxes however they wanted. Someone put up a pink flamingo on their lawn just because they could. It was glorious. But just when I thought the saga had ended, I got a text from my next-door neighbor, Tom. Dude, you might want to check your email. Confused, I pulled it up, and there it was, a brand new HOA violation notice, issued by Crescent Oaks' newly appointed HOA president. And at the bottom, where the signature belonged, was a name that made my blood run cold. Vice President, Patricia Whitmore, Debbie's sister. I stared at the email, my brain struggling to process the sheer absurdity of it. I had barely finished celebrating my victory over one Whitmore, and now there was another one stepping into the power vacuum. I sighed and clicked open the violation notice. Unauthorized lawn fixtures still present. Final warning. I let out a laugh. An exhausted, borderline hysterical laugh. They weren't even trying to be subtle. Debbie had barely been gone a week, and already her family was stepping in to carry on the Whitmore legacy of tyranny TM. I wasn't having it. I grabbed my phone and called the number at the bottom of the email. It rang twice before a voice answered, clipped and professional. This is Patricia Whitmore, Crescent Oaks HOA. I smirked. Wow, you didn't waste any time. There was a pause. I'm sorry, who is this? Oh, come on, Patty, it's me, your favorite neighborhood felony witness. Another pause, this one longer. Mr. my last name. Bingo, I said. Quick question. Are you seriously trying to enforce a violation for the exact same thing your sister just got booted over? Patricia's voice remained ice cold. Your lights remain unapproved per HOA guidelines. I leaned back, shaking, my head in disbelief. Tell me, Patricia, are you a golf club enthusiast too? Or does that run exclusively in Debbie's half of the family? She didn't take the bait. Your property remains non-compliant. I exhaled, pinching the bridge of my nose. You know, I was hoping this neighborhood would have a brief grace period where the HOA wasn't run by power-drunk lunatics. Guess not. This isn't personal, she said smoothly. I have nothing to do with my sister's incident. Oh, sure, I said. Just an amazing coincidence that as soon as she left, you stepped in and immediately went after the exact same thing she did. Patricia sighed, exasperated. This is simply about maintaining the integrity of Crescent Oaks. I smiled. See, Patricia, that's the problem. Your sister tried that line, and look where it got her. I'm not Debbie. No, you're just her less creative sequel. I could practically hear her teeth grinding. This conversation is unproductive. The violation stands. Either you remove the lights, or the HOA will pursue further action. I grinned. I was really hoping you'd say that. She hesitated. Excuse me? You're new to this position, so maybe you missed a tiny little detail. I let my voice drop into something resembling concern. Did you actually read the HOA bylaws before throwing your weight around? Silence. I continued. See, Debbie and the old board were so obsessed with making rules against things, they never bothered to check what wasn't covered. And you just inherited those same garbage policies. I stood up, pacing now, letting the moment build. I, on the other hand, have read those bylaws. And guess what, Patricia? Another pause. What? My lights, perfectly legal. She scoffed. That's not possible. HOA rules prohibit non-standard... but, I cut in. They don't prohibit solar-powered pathway illumination installed for safety purposes. Silence. I could feel her scanning her mental rulebook, frantically trying to find a counter. I went in for the kill. In fact, since Crescent Oaks doesn't have street lamps near individual properties, the absence of lighting along driveways could be considered a liability issue. I let the words settle. So if I remove these lights and some poor resident takes a nasty fall on my darkened driveway, well, that could open up some interesting legal discussions. Wouldn't you agree, Patricia? Another silence. This one's so long I almost thought she hung up. Finally, she spoke. You're bluffing. Try me. She inhaled sharply through her nose. This isn't over. Oh, I think it is, I said, grinning. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a perfectly lit driveway to enjoy. I hung up before she could respond. I'd won again. Patricia never sent another notice. In fact, within a few weeks, she had become remarkably quiet. Word around the neighborhood was that the HOA, now rattled by the whole Debbie situation, was under heavy scrutiny from residents who were sick of the nonsense. And the best part? At the next HOA meeting, one I had never attended before, but now had to witness, I got to watch Patricia Whitmore resign in front of the entire community. Apparently the board had very gently encouraged her to step down after concerns were raised about HOA overreach. The meeting room was full of people, nodding along, some of them throwing me amused glances as if they knew. The Whitmore dynasty was officially over. And Crescent Oaks? It was finally free. A week after Patricia's resignation, I came home to find something new in my yard, something that hadn't been there before. A single plastic pink flamingo. I stared at it, then glanced up to see Tom leaning against his porch railing, smirking. Thought it'd be a nice addition, he called out. I let out a slow, satisfied laugh. You know what, Tom? I think it's perfect. I left it exactly where it was, and for the first time since I moved in, Crescent Oaks truly felt like home.